you can't let them get away with their lies. Like, for instance, what's this most recent Fisman paper? I hope you've seen Byron Bridle's rebuttal of that yesterday. There
Yep.
was the what was the name of that event in Kitchener-Waterloo? I think it was called.
It was a town hall.
So there were like 500 people to see Byram, Julie Pinessi, Bonnie Millard, and a few others. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked again.
It's okay. We can actually talk about that because I think that's actually very important. I know what he did. I don't remember the details of exactly what number he changed, but he essentially corrected a false assumption in Fisman's data, his modeling
Yes,
data, to be more
it was.
accurate.
Yeah,
And it completely reversed the conclusion of his paper. So instead of saying that the unvaccinated were a danger to society, it said that as soon as you switched the one number and made that number more accurate, it showed that the vaccinated were more dangerous than the unvaccinated. Am I correct?
well,
And I'm
yes,
not making that claim. I'm just as Bridle said himself, garbage in, garbage out. The data
yeah,
itself it's. I don't think Byram's making the claim
no,
that the vaccinated are more dangerous, but he's
no.
just
He's
showing the
pointing out
weakness of the model.
the my summary. You're right on, Curtis. I think the parameter was the the likelihood of the unvaccinated being immunized from natural COVID was 0.2. And in the literature, if you actually did a lit search, they would have found like 0.6 or 0.8 is the number it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah, I think
most
it was
people
0.8.
now have natural immunity because most people have got some variant of COVID over the last 2 years. That was one thing, and uh, there are many very good replies, including his posted recently. One by Joseph Hickey from the Ontario Civil Liberties Association. Another long, lengthy rebuttal. Like that paper must be retracted because it is clearly non-scientific, and
Mm.
it wouldn't pass the muster of peer-reviewed uh, literature in a medical journal 2 years ago, or 10 years ago, or
Mm-hmm.
basically. So this addresses Julie Pinessi's point that there will be misinformation because sometimes people are wrong, but disinformation is actually shows malfeasance. It's actually has intent to spread untrue things, disinformation. So what they're trying to do with that article is to make it okay for Justin Trudeau to say that the unvaccinated are a bunch of unclean people that we should separate ourselves from, and that they're a fringe minority, mostly misogynists, and
Yeah.
hate speech coming out of our prime minister. And this needs to be supported by the media so that the compliant public will say, "Oh, see, Justin was right. The people that the unvaccinated are dirty and dangerous." And so when science gets polluted by politics like that, it's no longer science. It's just propaganda. And
Well,
so
it's a
the
pretty
good thing,
old trick.
well,
Divide and conquer, right?
it is an old trick. And by the way, it was the modeling that got COVID off the ground in the first place. Okay, and Denny Rancourt has some really neat data on all-cause mortality. Right from the beginning of 2020 all the way through. The way they treated the elderly in the old folks' homes, and the way they took sick people from hospitals and put them back in the old folks' homes, killed off the 80, 90-year-olds that were going to die anyway in the next few months, in all likelihood, statistically, and pushed them all up to die within a certain couple of weeks. That looked like if that trend continued, we'd have 2 million people dead within, 6 months. And so it was a model that said, we're going to have that many dead. And that model is is they knew they had to have a certain trajectory over a short period in order to get a projected trajectory. And so they did a number of things to increase those rates, and they're all fraudulent, and people will need to go to jail over this. Um, Let me list them. Okay, so number one is they put the sick elderly back into the old folks' homes and then isolated them. Okay, they weren't even like isolation has a huge effect on immune systems too. And they killed off more people so that their models would show a really steep increase over a short period of time. They also increased their fear by classifying someone who died with COVID as someone who died of COVID. Very important difference. People who died in a car accident but tested positive for COVID would show up in the count for died of COVID. Okay, so that's the second red flag. They can increase, the fear zone. Like, this isn't a bad flu, it's worse than usual. Then the PCR tests. The inventor of the PCR test happened to die like a few months before COVID started, but he outed Fauci years ago. He also said that PCR tests can't be used for testing for a virus. It's used to test for a genetic sequence. The genetic sequence, oh no, that rabbit hole I'm not going down. That's a red flag about PCR tests. There's so many false positives, and they can generate as many false positives as they want by increasing the number of cycles that the test is put through. Anything over 25 repetitions, or I think 25 to 30 is considered like the normal. And often people were having PCR tests over 40 cycles. Who knows? Maybe they had a quota. We need this many cases by that date. Increase your dial to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's criminal. Okay, I could keep going.
Well, even the one you mentioned about fear, I think I could probably find many people who would say that irrationally or intentionally increasing levels of fear in the population was an effective strategy to promote isolation and thereby get us through this pandemic, or to promote vaccination and thereby get us through this pandemic.
The Event 201 said that the biggest problem they would have was vaccine hesitancy. So how are they going to deal with that? Well, they're going to flood the zone with information. And flood the zone means it's impossible to keep track and to know what's going on. It also means we're going to flood the zone with the bad news we can generate. And so I would call that activity terrorism, not public health policies.